Hi, it's Steve and Joe from Freshagenda. And Steve, this week we're talking about our global outlook update, which we just sent to subscribers last week.
Mm-hmm.
Bit of an update on GDT, another positive event, but more a fat story than anything else.
Yep.
And of course, chat of the week.
Okay, so as you said, we
so
pushed.
Exciting.
Oh, it is. We pushed out an outlook at the end of last week. I just thought it'd be good if we just did the highlights of what changed. So what moved and impacted our read on the fundamentals. Milk supply in Europe tightening up. The US is going very strongly in the other direction.
Yeah.
US is awash with milk. And it's I guess the worrying thing for the industry is the momentum in cow numbers that's coming through, and margins. Prices are on the march, so margins are projected to get better as you go through the year. So the addition of cows and where they've been added is adding that pressure,
particularly for cheese, as we discussed last week.
Yeah. So the cheese market's flat. Without support, and probably flat with support in reality. So we see rising stocks in cheese and butter, and the other thing on the supply side is that we did see pasture conditions in New Zealand get a little bit better than what they were, which has kicked milk along a bit stronger, we think, in the coming months.
Yeah.
The US is going to buy product at a slower rate. That profoundly disappointed the market in last month, so that lower amount of support, it's going to push purchases out further in the year. There is a further issue I'll talk about in the next line, but here's one of those things as well that where we talk about the fundamentals should ultimately set values. Here's one where we've seen a spurt in prices that will ultimately impact the fundamentals, because the affordability of butterfat in the developing world, we think, has been a challenge for several months, and with the large rise through the GDT platform, that's probably going to come back further. The lockdowns in US and EU will prolong the food service recovery, and then possibly the weaker cheese prices spur demand as we go further in the year. So that's we would hope. So those things are what definitely changed, the things to keep an eye on. US policy is still a big factor here, whether there's two prongs, whether there's a larger amount of product purchases to come or product support to come through a donations program, which is currently a bit vague and ill-defined, as well as a provision for paying money to farmers. And what that does, as we've seen what it's done at the end of 2020, it's given them a year long. So will that continue to put more milk in the system? And essentially, it's all about getting consumers cheaper product, I guess. Well, that'll help.
Yeah, and the other part of that is the I guess the wrangling over household income support too. So actually supporting households to be able to purchase food,
which goes on.
Yeah.
European weather's something to watch. Feed costs they've surged lately, largely due to I guess the strength of buying for the Chinese market.
Yeah.
And there's a bit more pressure perhaps on the affordability in Southeast Asia to watch because of where prices have got to, and maybe Mexico's demand is a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
But, so plenty in that mix
that we'll be watching. Yep.
So against that background, GDT rallied, kept going, sixth gain in this rally. As you can see there, they're the highlights. Butter was the standout. AMF was patchy. It went up in net terms, except for C2, which was weak, which is odd. And there's your price comparisons with other price.
So butter very strong there on GDT compared to some of those other measures.
Interesting there on the left hand side, just to add that point, don't have a chart on it, but New Zealand's the strength of this ongoing rally has been enough to prompt Fonterra to lift their price
20 cents.
20 cents. Yeah,
looks solid. So that's positive news for Kiwi farmers.
Definitely.
And also strengthens the point that there'll be as much milk as possible being produced in these next couple of months, given a bit better pasture conditions and pretty good price.
They'll push hard.
Yep.
So a couple of things to look at out of the GDT, which is interesting. The rally in butterfat, there's two parts of this, obviously, butter and AMF.
Yes.
That's profound.
Come here for the big insights.
So looking at when these rallies have occurred, so we've seen a long run in butter now, lasting 9 events.
Yep.
Comparing to what we've seen in the past, there's a bit of seasonality in the way that butter rallies.
Yeah, this Q1 rally that we've seen over the last 4 years.
Well, even earlier. So just on that chart there, showing the rallies which have typically happened in Q1, around Q1. Some of them started earlier. The one in 2016-17 was associated with that tightening of butterfat, so that went a lot longer, and there's a couple of pauses there. But, it's quite interesting how strong it is at this time. What do you reckon that's about?
Well, we had discussed whether when availability is high in the last quarter of the previous year, prices get a bit down and then they rally again when supply tightens.
They become very attractive and get driven up.
Yeah.
Because there's fairly small volumes.
That's right.
And, when you look at butter, and I'll just jump forward to this chart without spoiling what we're talking about here, but butter is the smaller volume that's put on
GDT compared to New Zealand trade.
Yeah, but in the GDT market, New Zealand is the dominant supplier.
That's right.
And that's maybe the availability really gets tested then.
Yeah.
And GDT as a mechanism is used in two ways, to soften prices and then to spur them. So it's anyway, just an interesting comparison.
Interesting. QI.
And then the other part of this is what's been happening with AMF, which rally is more volatile, even though the butter chart was quite volatile. This one is looking at the relationship between changes in volume and changes in GDT prices for AMF.
Yeah, and it's quite obvious there, isn't it? When supply is low, the blue line there, the prices really spike.
Yeah. So our analyst Vuko did a correlation of these, and it's a negative correlation, which it's working in reverse. 55%, which is not overly strong, not what we like to see in most price-driven relationships, but it's probably weakened since we saw that big climb. So the later couple of years, but we do see a strong connection when those changes occur. Just reminding there, AMF around 40% is traded on GDT.
Yeah, so it's quite substantial what's available on GDT, and then that other chart is just showing the slow reduction, I suppose, with that rolling 12 months of AMF sales on GDT. So it's slowly trending down there.
Yeah. Yeah. Then the last and most important thing, obviously, in a GDT event is how China played, and they were strong across the two powders and butter again. This time, skim milk powder, they're up around 80% of the volume.
But no one else turned up, so.
And just a reminder, we've used this chart before, we're still in a reasonable band of affordability for the Chinese market.
Yep.
We're not out of bounds here at all, and there are factors behind each of those supporting the demand. So
sure,
that remains fairly good. Joe, chart of the week.
Well, just going back to one of the points we made in that outlook slide, EU milk output. We're still waiting for complete data for December, but for these three players that make up, I think, about 45% of EU milk production. We've just seen in the last weekly data that Germany is trending down quite a bit, as is France. UK still up but slowing. So obviously that build to the EU spring is going to be fairly critical in terms of market balance. And it's looking okay, not too strong.
No, it's a weaker thing, and that's propping up the European market at the moment, it seems. And just to point out, UK has left the EU. We keep adding them into an EU, so it's a European region, but it's
we are aware.
We're across that bit. All right. Okay. On that important note, that's all from us this week. Hope to see you again next week.